Alrighty. Well, I think we'll just go ahead and get started. So welcome everybody again to Cannabis Night School presented by WholesomeCo. We're really excited to be here with you all tonight. We have partnered with Utah Patients Coalition, Utah Cannabis United, and Utah Patients for Cannabis and Natural Choices for this presentation. We're going to be covering basically just the basics for staying compliant, understanding the laws associated around medical cannabis, making sure you have just the information you need in order to stay compliant and avoid any issues legally speaking. Okay, so my name is Julian Miranda. I am the WholesomeCo Community Engagement Manager. So excited to be here with you guys. We've got a great presentation, really excited to dive into this. And I will turn it over to my co-host to introduce themselves and say a little bit about themselves.
Hi, my name is JD Lauritsen. Some of you might know me as the Leafy Lawyer. I recently left private practice and joined up with WholesomeCo as their general counsel and head of compliance and head of government affairs. So I'm excited to be here tonight and tell you guys a little bit about your rights as a cannabis patient in Utah.
Des?
Sorry, I didn't know. My kid would be out of the room by the time I started.
Okay.
Vote with her, so we're happy. Desiree, Hennesey, I'm with the Utah Patients Coalition. We're the ones who ran and passed the Utah Medical Cannabis ballot initiative here in Utah and just continue to work on access for patients with, on the lobbying side. So I do a lot of that. We recently have branched out and started the Utah Patient Subsidy Program, where we've partnered with all of the pharmacies to give, help to those who maybe are struggling to pay for their medical cannabis. And right now, just FYI, we're starting with the terminal patients. So if you're waiting in the queue and you haven't heard back in the last couple of weeks, it's because we're filtering through all the terminal patients first, and then we'll be letting everybody else on.
Hi, I'm Tana King. I am the creator and founder of Utah Cannabis United and soon to be joint effort. Utah Cannabis United is like my business name, my Facebook group name, and all the things, helping with people with medical cards, CBD products that are good for them. Trojan horse, by the way. And joint effort is going to be a low-cost med card clinic where it is going to be entirely affordable for humans to have access to cannabis without having to choose from their food and their power budget. So that's me in a nutshell.
Awesome, thank you.
Hi, my name is Shelly Ullric. First shout out, it is National Fibromyalgia Awareness Day today. So I wanted to make sure to put that out first and foremost. I am the social media manager for a Facebook group and page called Utah Patients for Cannabis and Natural Choices. We help patients with everything from medicinal herbs to kratom, CBD, and of course, cannabis. And since going legal last year, we've been helping patients navigate the system to obtain their cards, learn the different formats and how to utilize them. We have a page if you want to also like. It is good for getting information about education events like this one tonight, as well as amendments in the laws when they happen. And that's about it for me. If you have a hard time finding us, omit the word cannabis and put in Utah Patients for Natural Choices because Facebook can be weird that way.
Perfect. Awesome. Thanks for that clarification. And thank you, everyone, for those wonderful introductions. And with that being said, we're going to go ahead and hop into the rest of our talk here. So again, a little bit about WholesomeCo. We are one of the licensed cannabis pharmacies here in Utah. We're located in West Bountiful. You can see our address, our hours of operation, and our contact info there on the left-hand side of your screen. And just so you know, in addition to our excellent inventory and extremely knowledgeable staff, we also offer remote or virtual pharmacist consultations, totally free. And we also deliver to the majority of the state. We go do St. George, Moab, Logan, Vernal, Duchesne, all over. So definitely give that a shot if you haven't tried it already. This week's topics are know your rights. So we just wanted, now that in the last episode, we kind of discussed how to get your card, the different kinds of cards, what the qualifying conditions are. So now you've got your card. Now we want you to know how to stay compliant and legal now that you have it and avoid getting into any kind of trouble. So some of the things that we're going to cover are just the basics for staying compliant. Workplace, landlord, child custody, and other judicial protections. What to do if you are pulled over by a law enforcement officer. We're going to dive into some of the record-keeping databases that are in use here in the state, just so you know kind of what information is getting collected and why. And then a big topic that we're going to cover as well is, owning a firearm and having a medical cannabis card, / a concealed carry license. We're going to kind of dissect these issues and kind of let you know, what the deal is with all of that. And again, just another very special thanks to our partners, Utah Patient Coalition, Utah Cannabis United, and Utah Patients for Cannabis and Natural Choices. We are so thankful to have you guys on here with us. In their Facebook groups. Again, please, I encourage everyone to check them out. They're great resources for information. You can get a lot of questions answered there, excuse me. And a really great community. So definitely check it out. And then the last thing, just a disclaimer, the content and information in this presentation is not legal advice. We definitely encourage you to seek a lawyer if you are having any issues. However, we do have an actual lawyer presenting and walking through all this content and information with us. But just again, a disclaimer for you all. Alrighty, so the first topic that we're gonna hop into is the basics for staying compliant. We want you to know just kind of what the parameters are, now that you have a card, how much you can carry, where, things of that nature. So how to stay compliant now that you have your card. So first things first, understanding what your purchasing limits are. So for flower, you're allowed to have 113 grams every 28 days, and in addition to that, you can have up to 20 grams of cannabis concentrate products within the same 28-day period. Some of the forms of medical cannabis that you're allowed to possess are flower, but that's for vaporization only. You cannot put an open flame to your cannabis flower in Utah. You must use a dry herb vaporizer. Vape cartridges are allowed, tinctures, gelatinous cubes or lozenges, topical creams and salves, concentrates such as resin, wax, shatter, things of those nature, RSO, fecal oil. You can get sublingual tablets, capsules, oral sprays, and transdermal patches. So as you can see, we really have access to just about the vast majority of the different product offerings in any other cannabis market. And those options are only going to continue to grow. But now I want to hand it over to JD so he can kind of dive into some of the other kind of nuances and important things to know now that you have your card.
Awesome. Thanks, Julian. So the first topic we want to talk about is traveling with your medical cannabis in-state versus out-of-state. And I'll probably start with the out-of-state first. An important part of one of the bills that was passed this last legislative session, was that until July 1st of this year, you are authorized to travel out of state to purchase your medicine. Which is a big thing for a number of people as Utah's program kind of continues to build itself out and become more mature. So that's important to know, but understand that cannabis remains federally illegal. So crossing the border to purchase your cannabis and returning with it is a federal crime. However, cannabis prosecutions of that sort at the federal level are not really a priority anymore. But it's important to understand that it remains federally illegal, even if Utah law allows you to cross the border and come back with your with your cannabis. In terms of in-state transportation of your cannabis, you're going to want to make sure to keep it in the package, the packaging that you bought it in, especially as that is applied to flour, and or the gelatinous cubes or the other kind of edible products. And it also needs to remain in an opaque bag or box that is provided to you by the pharmacy in order for it to remain legal. And so that's important to understand. And really the advice that I give to people is, if you're going to be traveling with it, whether in state or out of state, the best thing to do is to conceal it somewhere in your vehicle, that there's no argument that you could have had access to it, either, in terms of, being able to use it while you're in your vehicle. Even if the law may allow you to do so, consuming in your vehicle is probably not the best decision. It'll give law enforcement just another reason to look into you further. So that's important to understand. And so, for me personally, it is in the opaque bag or box, in the trunk, away from the passenger compartment. So there's no argument that I could have had access to it while I was driving or as a passenger. Now, the law may allow you to do otherwise, but I do believe that is probably best practices to keep yourself safe.
Now, JD,
yes.
is it true that if they smell it, it is just cause for search and seizure?
That's a great question, Shelly. Here in the state of Utah, the scent of cannabis alone still remains probable cause to search a vehicle. Now, across the country, and most recently, I believe in Maryland, a number of states, one after the other, is determining that scent alone is no longer probable cause. What they are saying is that scent plus other indicators of criminal activity may be enough for probable cause, but here in Utah, scent alone is still enough. And when I was in private practice, I was really hoping to get a case to try to challenge that, but I didn't before I left to work with WholesomeCo. So if anybody does run across a case like that, and find yourself, and finds a good criminal defense attorney to kind of run it up the ladder to the Utah Supreme Court, some good arguments can be made as to why, now that we have legal medical cannabis, why scent alone should no longer be probable cause to search a vehicle.
Now, if that happens, though, I recommend if they, pull up, they say, I can smell cannabis. You can say, it is medical. This is my card. Pull it out. Everybody should have it on them at all times if they have their cannabis. And then, ask them to try to pull you up on their database to prove that you're a medical cannabis card if the card enough isn't. It doesn't work for them because sometimes they claim that it doesn't look real enough, right? So still try to not let them search your vehicle. Use all of the tools that you have, like your card, but we'll work on that this year. We're going to just try to add that scent alone, scent plus medical cannabis card doesn't mean that they can search your vehicle.
Yep. And I take probably a little bit of a different view when it comes to interactions with the police, and we'll probably get to that a little bit later. But what Des says is not bad advice. If I were willing to do anything in my interactions with law enforcement, it would be to show them my medical cannabis card, and that's about it. But that'll be perfect for a little bit later. But what Des says is not bad advice at all.
I usually do give advice, but quickly, another thing, and you may have moved on from this, so sorry, but if you travel out of state and then you're coming back in, also still make sure that you have the same forms, that it's not that it's still in an opaque childproof container, that you have the right amounts, and that you still have to, in order to use this, you have to still be a current medical cannabis patient in the state of Utah with one of the qualifying conditions or have been through the Compassionate Use Board. Just because we've extended this deadline so you can shop out of state, it doesn't mean that we're not back in that period of where, you just had to have a conversation with your doctor. You have to be part of a medical cannabis plan to shop out of state and be illegal.
That's a great
question.
point, Des.
It says in the law that when you have it away from the house after you've purchased it, you can have no more than 10% of the original purchase. How does that work with knowing that you just purchased it as opposed to you're having it on you for emergency cases?
That's a good question, and I'm not sure I've got the answer. Des, do you have the answer to it?
I have part of the answer. So they didn't So you're supposed to purchase for, 14-day supply, but you can have a 2-month supply. Does that make sense? So in your possession, if you were to get your house raided, you could have like a 2-month supply. I believe I'm saying this right now. I'm second guessing myself, but you're only supposed to purchase a 14-day supply at a time was the idea. How that came out in code, now I'm second guessing my.
Yeah,
We may
no,
have
I
to
think
come back
that's,
to that one.
yep, I think that's a good question. I think we may have to do some additional research because I've wondered that too. I've read that part of the code myself, Shelly, and wondered because it says it's not supposed to vary by more than 10% from the weight that's stated on the on the package itself. So it's a good question. Another one of the mysteries, I guess, in the Utah cannabis laws, which there are a few of them. So I think turning to where are you allowed to consume cannabis? This is something I get asked quite a bit. Private versus public view. So the law authorizes you to consume outside of public view. Now that doesn't necessarily mean just within a private residence. It's anything that's outside of public view. So your backyard might even, qualify and things like that. So it's not just within a private residence. It's not as limited as some people may say. And actually, what the law really does, does say is that a patient card holder, a provisional patient card holder, or a non-resident patient may not use in public view medical cannabis or a cannabis product. So that's what the law says exactly. So anything outside of public view is a legal place for you to consume. One caveat that's in the law that kind of just it's outside of this private versus public view is for emergency use for an emergency medical condition, which is defined otherwise in the law. But that allows you as a patient to consume, or for a caregiver or a guardian to administer medical cannabis or a cannabis product in public view in the event of an emergency medical condition. And the emergency medical condition is not defined within the medical cannabis laws. It's defined elsewhere in the Utah code. And the code section for the emergency medical condition definition is 31A 22-627. So that is kind of the one exception to the private versus public view, where you're allowed to consume.
I found that law code really quick. Let me clarify. Maybe, hold on. Okay, do you want me to clarify it really quick?
Oh, of course, go ahead.
What it says is that you cannot have, so the 10% is the cannabis flower in a quantity that varies no more than 10% of the stated weight on each package. So that means you couldn't have stuffed the bag with more. And it says at the time of medical cannabis, cardholder transports or possesses the container, that container in public, that one container can't have more than 10% of what was supposed to be in it. In public, it is contained in an opaque bag or box that the medical cannabis pharmacy provides. So that 10% applies to each bag individually. So when they look at your packaging during transport, if you have your 14-day supply or your 1-month supply, as long as you're within those grams, and each package has no more than 10% of its original weight.
So
Yeah, and and that's a good point.
If I understand this correctly, then if you buy an 1/8 jar of flour, just do not add extra flour into there. It has to, the quantity in that flour cannot be more or cannot exceed 10% of 1/8 of an ounce.
Correct.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you. Thanks for that clarification, Des.
Okay, and now turning to when and where to carry your medical cannabis card. The short answer is is always. You need to be carrying it certainly if you're in possession. But I've heard from a number of patients that they carry it in multiple places. Some people carry it in their wallet and in their car and in multiple other multiple places. So just it's a good idea to keep your medical cannabis card with you at all times. Certainly when you are in possession of cannabis. And we've alluded to this before, but the exemption to have out-of-state product runs until July 1st of this year. But as Des said, you still need to be within the bounds of Utah law. It's not as if you can go to Colorado and buy a product that would not be one of the approved products here in Utah. And this is likely going to apply mostly to edible products. Other states allow different forms than gelatinous cubes and lozenges and stuff like that. So that's one to certainly be careful of. But if you wouldn't otherwise be legal in Utah, that's the thing to remember, is if you bring it back, you still have to be compliant with Utah law. And recommendation letters are no longer valid. Patients must now have a medical cannabis card to purchase at a cannabis pharmacy. And also, in order to come under the decriminalization, parts of the Controlled Substances Act here in Utah, you would need to be a valid medical cannabis patient here in Utah to get those protections.
Excellent. So, hey, JD, I have a question in regards to product from out of state. So I just want to get some clarification. So after July 1st, and I believe even now, but if I were to go to another state, pick up, let's say, a medicated beverage, like a soda that has THC in it, or a cookie, or a Rice Krispie treat, and I bring that back into Utah, even though I have my medical card, that won't protect me if a police officer finds me, or if I get caught with that in my possession. Is that correct?
That's completely correct. Your cannabis still has to be in a medicinal dosage form under Utah law.
Beautiful, beautiful. And then one thing I just like to add also, guys, for our audience members, if you do not have access to a printer and you would like to get your medical cannabis card printed, we will happily do that for you at our pharmacy. Just ask our reception and we'll get that taken care of for you. But beautiful. I think that wraps it up for this slide. So moving right on.
We had a good question. Somebody asked, how much product can you bring back out of state? You can have your allotted amount, so your 113 grams and your 20 grams every 28 days of concentrate. So you can have that, you can purchase that out of state and bring it back. So you can have that on you when you come back. But remember, you are breaking federal law during that moment of crossing state lines, but you're safe once you get here, or
Gotcha.
so the law says you are.
Gotcha. Perfect. Thank you. All righty. So now we want to kind of dive into just some basic workplace, landlord, child custody, and other judicial protections. So again, now that you have your card and you're legal, you're using medical cannabis legally, how is this going to impact these other areas of your life? So again, JD, please feel free to take it away.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Julian. So Utah's medical cannabis laws, like a lot of cannabis laws in other states, do provide some workplace protections. We don't provide maybe as expansive as protections as some states, but if you are an employee of a state, of the state or a political subdivision, then you do have some protections as a medical cannabis patient. So they, under Utah Code Section 2661A 111, a state or political subdivision has to treat an employee's medical cannabis use the same way they would the use of any other prescribed controlled substance. And that shows up in a number of places in Utah's medical cannabis laws, where they cannot, whether it be judges, whether it be court commissioners, whether it be in terms of child custody or in other places, considering your cannabis use differently, or they can't consider your cannabis use any differently than they would your use of any other prescribed controlled substance. And so what that means is that a state or political subdivision, they can't take any adverse action against you as a state or political subdivision employee for a failed drug test due to cannabis, without evidence that you were impaired or that your cannabis use was adversely affecting your job performance. So if you merely fail a drug test as a state and political subdivision employee, there is not much that they can do in way of taking adverse action against you on the job. However, if there is evidence that you were intoxicated or that it was adversely affecting your job performance, then they can take that adverse action against you. Now, these protections do not apply if it would jeopardize federal funding, if it would jeopardize, like federal security clearance, or there's a federal background determination that's required for the employee's position, or if the employer's position is dependent on a license that is subject to federal regulation. So this is one of those areas where cannabis remaining federally illegal and being legal on the state level, kind of, it's where they bump heads. And federal law seems to prevail, in most instances. So if you're a federal employee, your ability to use cannabis is not probably going to, you're probably not going to be able to use it, because cannabis remains, a Schedule I, controlled substance. It's one of the, I'll just say it, one of the idiocies of federal legalization. There's many of them, but this is certainly one of them. So for private companies, they do not have, they don't have to provide the same protections as state and political subdivision employers. In fact, it was written specifically into our cannabis laws that private companies do not have to provide those same types of protections. But more and more, and I'm not sure if this is the case here in Utah, but more and more private companies, I believe, are no longer, using cannabis drug tests to weed out employees. Although, it'll go from employer to employer. So just understand, if you're working for a private company, you're not going to necessarily have those same protections. But it would be good to keep in mind, when you're looking for an employer, if you are a medical cannabis patient, if you have the ability to look for an employer that might be willing to accommodate your medical cannabis use. And also too, whether it be under the ADA or whether it be under any sort of other disability law, there usually is no requirement that they accommodate your medical cannabis use, because again, it remains illegal under federal law. And I think in terms of using your medicine at work, I think that you're going to need to use your best judgment, understand how your employer feels about those types of things. But really, it's just I think using your best judgment is when and where to consume is appropriate. And I think honestly, if you are one of those people that needs to consume throughout the day, to manage your condition, having your employer understand that, would be a good thing to do.
Yeah, just to give everybody a little bit of hope too. There's quite a few large scale companies in Utah that have removed THC from their 5-panel, as far as their adding you on as an employee, and then also just random UAs, that kind of thing. So maybe do a little bit of digging. If you know people, do some networking and ask. That way you're not directly asking the employer, but maybe just ask people that work there, hey, do you know if this is like a thing? You always want to get a feel for the water first before you just go gung-ho and ask and tell people that you're a medical cannabis patient. But I think people would be surprised at the amount of companies in Utah. Some of them have asked me not to announce them, but they're huge and they don't test for THC. So I think people would be surprised, and it's a good thing.
Funny thing, and then if we have time, I'll tell a funny story. It's not funny. The IRS doesn't test, is my understanding. But a lot of, I had one patient was really nervous. So she went and applied for a job at a clinic, and she was like, I'm going to test dirty because I'm a medical cannabis patient. So she went in there and tested. And in that process, they asked her about it and decided to become a cannabis clinic. So that was handy. Also, CDL drivers will probably, just because they're federal and they're driving, will probably never be able to use cannabis because they can't even use an opiate. So what our goal is eventually any job that you can use an opiate on, we would like to be able to add to this with some federal changes. We are having an issue, and I thought about not mentioning who, but why not? Ogden City has totally decided to just blow this out of the water. They don't care. And they have issued a letter to their policemen and firemen that say, if you even get a medical cannabis card, we will fire you. They put 3 people on, removed them from duty until they relinquish their medical cannabis cards. And so we are working through that, interesting enough. So what we're saying, and a lot of what we're saying, why I bring this up, is we're telling you what the laws are, but you're still playing a game of roulette so many times in Utah as people interpret this in their own ways and decide how they're going to be using it. So It's roulette where you go.
Yeah, reefer madness is alive and well. It's the truth. And I think that Des makes a great point, is we're telling you what the law says, but the interpretation of it by different, employers and different agencies, and it's all over the board. And hopefully, at some point we'll be able to get everybody on the same page, but we're definitely not there yet. I also get a lot of questions about like landlord protections. When I was in private practice, I probably had 4 or 5 different people call me at different times wanting to know about what protections they have. Now, obviously, if you are a homeowner, you have much greater protections, right? In terms of your ability to use cannabis in your home, and things like that. Although there's quite a few reported cases, there's case law out there about some of the insurance battles that homeowners have had against their insurers and stuff like that. And it's another area where, because cannabis remains federally illegal, insurance companies usually are able to win those cases. I've read a number of them, and they seem kind of crazy to me, but the insurance companies seem to win. But if you're a renter, that's something to really to understand. And landlords, there are no protections for medical cannabis patients in Utah in our law, in terms of landlord protections if you're a renter. And also understand too, if you live in federally subsidized housing, because cannabis remains federally illegal, you can be evicted by your or you have your lease terminated by your local public housing authority. As a matter of fact, as recently as 2002, in a case called Department of Housing and Urban Development versus Rucker, the United States Supreme Court said that you can, they're well within their rights to terminate your lease for illegal drug activity, even if you, as the renter, have not engaged in the illegal activity on the premises. So if someone visiting your home or someone staying in your home and their name's not even on the lease. So that's another one of the idiocy of federal illegality and state legality that crops up. And you'll really want to look at your lease. Now, I highly doubt there are any apartments, here in Utah or other rentals that are going to have something in their lease that allows for medical cannabis use. So understand that, you're not going to have those same protections. And I hope that's something that we can work into our law at some point, as protections for patients, that are renting. Because to me, you should have the same protections as an owner, as a renter, but where you're not an owner, you don't get to decide what goes on in your property.
If that'll ever happen, JD, just because wouldn't they treat it kind of like the smoking? There's no smoking in units anyway. So even if someone is a medical cannabis card holder, there are going to be certain things that they're not going to be able to do, even if we get to that point.
Yeah, I think you make a great point, Tana. When it comes to smoking, or in our case here in Utah, vaporization, I think you're going to run into the same things, right? Like if you can't smoke a cigarette or use a tobacco vaporization device, probably aren't going to be able to use a medical cannabis vaporization device. But it may change for some other types of products. But also too, there might be ways to work protections into the law. But I think another thing is just talk to your landlord, as part of, trying to, when you're looking for a new place to live. I think that's something that's important, but largely rentals are not going to not be okay with it, but understand that's just the risk you're taking as a medical cannabis patient living in a rented space, so. Okay, and then the final topic for this slide is child custody and other judicial protections. And I think the simple thing here is there are a ton of different Utah code sections that apply, to this topic. And really the simple thing to say is the same rules apply as any other controlled substance. So in terms of child custody, or in terms of a judge or a commissioner considering your medical cannabis use, they have to consider it the same way they would your use of any other prescribed controlled substance. So it's not the silver bullet that some people might think. Some people might think that because you're a medical cannabis patient, you kind of have this ironclad protection. No, as a matter of fact, I not long ago, when I was still in private practice, talked to a gentleman about child custody. And I told him, I said, yes, they can't consider it any differently than if you had a prescription for another controlled substance. I said, but they can still consider it. So if your medical cannabis use is found to not be in the best interest of your child, they can still take action, right? So that's just something important to keep in mind. It doesn't give you any greater or less protection than any other, prescribed controlled substance. And if anybody wants all the code sections, you can message Julian or someone, and we can provide all of them. But there's quite a few of them. But it runs the gamut all the way from child custody to other judicial protections and probation and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. Just to go off your point there, JD, if there's anything, feel free to shoot us a message on our Facebook page, or you can send us an email at hello@wholesome.co, and we can provide all that information to you guys. But excellent. Thank you so much, JD. Ladies, anything else to add?
No, I just really like to, sorry.
Go ahead.
I really like what JD said and want to kind of drive that home, that they're going to treat it just like alcohol, just like narcotics that are prescribed to you. Just make sure that things are locked up in cases. If you're processing things at home, where's my camera? Sorry. Butter, oils, anything like that. Just have it locked up in a little box in the fridge. Make sure you have a safe and just treat it accordingly like everything else, because it is not a get out of jail free card. And you still have to be very, very careful with your kids in the house.
I have been in a couple meetings with DCFS, and just them kind of deciding how they were going to handle this, how they're going to handle custody. They actually meet like every couple months, and as a big stakeholder group, and I get to be on those. But from the top down, their goal is not to remove kids for cannabis use. If you're playing by the rules and you're able to care for your children, and you're keeping it in a locked container, and your kids aren't getting exposed to it, they are not interested in taking kids for medical cannabis use. I've had a lot of patients or parents even, come to me and say, I want to try this, but I'm so nervous about DCFS. If that happens to you, come to us. I have great relationships in DCFS. We'll work it out. It takes time. It's not an overnight fix, but just they're going to treat it the same way. If you're taking opiates and you can no longer take care of your kids, it's going to be treated the same as if you're taking cannabis and you're you're not able to take care of your kids. But cannabis alone is not a reason to lose custody of your kids or to get less custody of your kids if you're in a custody battle. That alone is not a deciding factor. It's how you can care for them is a deciding factor. If cannabis inhibits that, then that will be the problem, not cannabis itself.
Couldn't have said it any better myself, Des, that's for sure.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right. Thank you guys so much. Moving right along. So next, I think this is going to be a lot of important information on this slide, what to do when interacting with the law enforcement officer, particularly if you get pulled over and you have product on you. We're going to kind of cover, basically, we want to give you guys just some basics on, information every citizen should know during a traffic stop, and just kind of some suggestions again how to handle and conduct yourself. And just again, full disclosure and disclaimer, again, the content and information shared in this presentation is not legal advice, and just make sure that you are consulting with an actual lawyer if you do find yourself in one of these predicaments. And with that said, take it away, JD.
Wait,
Awesome.
first,
Oh,
as is again, I think that we're going to go over these first, on paper. And then I think JD has to make a video of each one of him interacting like the police officer with a patient and us.
That's some role playing.
Yeah.
For sure.
Real world.
Yeah, I'd be happy to ride shotgun with any patient that gets pulled over by law enforcement, because what we are about to talk about is a lot easier to say than it is to do. I think everyone, long before, we had medical cannabis in Utah. I think anyone, when you get pulled over by law enforcement, you get the jitters, you get nervous. I mean, I know when I even, when I pass by law enforcement, when I'm on the freeway, if I'm going 5 or 10 miles an hour or over, I'm convinced that I'm going to be pulled over. So I get the nervousness that it creates. I get the feelings that law enforcement can create for people. So what we are going to say here is what you should do, but not everyone is going to do this. But what we're talking about here is the way to best protect yourself And if you are prosecuted, if you are arrested and if you are prosecuted for a cannabis crime, this is the way to best help your lawyer, to be able to get your case, get your case dismissed. So I think that's the kind of, the qualifying statement to all of this. So there are certain things that every, citizen should know during a traffic stop. First and foremost, both the driver and the passenger or passengers have the right to remain silent under the Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution. Personally, as an attorney, my two favorite amendments are the Fifth Amendment and the Sixth Amendment. The Fifth Amendment gives you the right to remain silent, and the Sixth Amendment gives you the right to a jury trial. There are other amendments that are incredibly important, but as an attorney, those are two of the most important to me. So just remember, you always have the right to remain silent. You do not have to incriminate yourself. Additionally, you do not have to consent to a search of your vehicle. That is, the Fourth Amendment, allows you to decline to have them, search your vehicle. And that's incredibly important too, because if you do consent to a search, you're really going to hamstring, if not, completely curtail the ability of your attorney to challenge that search, later on. Because if you've consented, then it's, it's pretty well the end of it in terms of a search. Under Utah law, and I actually saw someone say this in the comments earlier, I think it was Zach, that, field sobriety tests are optional. I recommend that no one ever consent to a field sobriety test. I believe they are designed to make people fail. And certainly where field sobriety tests, and this is my opinion, as they currently exist, are not really designed to determine for cannabis intoxication. A lot of them are more designed for, for alcohol. And if you ever read like a cannabis DUI report, you end up getting to see that, that they'll say things like, green tongue and some other things. So the field sobriety test is just not going to be helpful. So I think we might have lost our slides. So I'll wait for a second to see if Julian pulls them back up.
You're rolling dirty right now. It just
That's right. I'm blind right now. I can't see the the slides.
Well, when you're talking about field sobriety tests too for cannabis, if they're doing the same thing for cannabis that they do for alcohol, I feel like that's so counterproductive, because people that are medicating with cannabis are generally super sick, maybe not mobile, so it's hard to get around. So you want them to have pointed toes and walk straight and do all I don't know, I've never done one before, but you want them to do all these things. And it's like, they're going to fail it just because they're not in good health, or they don't have the balance, or they have a walker, or like, what do people in that situation do if the officer tells them to take a field sobriety test and they're scared? Because everybody gets apprehensive when the lights turn on, regardless of how awesome you are.
You know that you're going to have to, you're a patient anyway. So that you're going to, if they make you do a UA, you're going to come up dirty. So everything is writing on this field sobriety test in their opinion. I've had multiple patients tell me that they had just had knee surgery. I had one tell me, I had just had knee surgery and he made me stand on that knee and I couldn't, it hurt too bad. And so therefore failed the sobriety test. But he's like, I hadn't used cannabis in 24 hours. And it's ridiculous. These field sobriety tests, it's your word against theirs at the end of the day.
Should you demand a blood test at that point if they want something?
Yeah.
If you want to give up that right.
Yeah, you're going to have to consent. And this is the next part that we were going to get to. By having a driver's license in Utah, you impliedly consent to chemical testing. And when we say chemical testing, we mean blood, breath, or urine. So by having your driver's license, you consent to that. If you decline a chemical test, you will automatically lose your license. And one thing to understand too is here in Utah, I believe it was not this legislative session, but the past legislative session, they changed the law as it relates to metabolite DUIs. And if you have only cannabis metabolites in your system, you will not be, you cannot be found guilty of a metabolite DUI. So that's important. So, understand that, but you do have to consent to, I guess you don't have to, but you probably should. But understand too that Utah doesn't really have a, kind of a per se limit as to the amount of active THC that can be in your system like certain other states do. So it's pretty subjective in terms of when an officer thinks you're, impaired or not. So even more of a reason if you're a cannabis patient not to consent to those field sobriety tests, because the field sobriety test is going to be used in court to, to try to obtain a conviction. So that's something to keep in mind. And I'm blind once again, and I can't see see where we are in the presentation.
I'll try to pull the slides up really fast. I don't think I can screen share, but I will try to pull them up.
Julian, you still with us, brother?
No, he got knocked off again.
His
think I'm
internet
back.
is, there we go.
I'm sorry, everybody, about that. I think I'm back in action though. Let me try and share my screen one more time. Okay, are we all good here? Still dealing with these technical issues.
Nothing like live.
I'm gonna get you some Google Fiber, Julian.
For real.
Not letting me open the slides either way. Do we remember what our next topic was? Can we remember?
I think he's got it. I think he's got it.
How are we looking on?
All right,
everyone's
I think,
end
yep.
here?
Yep, I think we're good. So we just talked about the chemical test, and so we'll talk about some things about how to reduce your risk during the traffic stop, and some of this is incredibly pertinent, just generally for people. So stop your car in a safe place and do so as quickly and safely as possible. Turn off the engine, turn on internal lighting, open your window halfway or as far as you feel comfortable. Place your hands on the steering wheel and avoid any sudden movements. And when requested to do so, present your driver's license, registration, and proof of insurance. And then what to do, in the event that you're, once you are pulled over and the officer approaches your vehicle, ask the officer, why did you pull me over? And then if the officer begins to ask you additional questions, politely answer, I prefer not to discuss my day or my evening. And if the officer continues to ask you questions, ask if you are being detained or if you are free to leave. If you're free to leave, if the officer tells you you're free to leave, go ahead and do so. However, if you're detained, invoke the Fifth Amendment and observe your right to remain silent. And the sad thing is that cannabis patients are likely going to have to go through arrests and have gone through arrests. And the collateral damage that comes from that is not just the arrest itself, but it's the cost to get your vehicle out of impound. It's the cost to hire an attorney. It's the cost for any potential other court fees and things that you have. And so that's one thing that I wish law enforcement would understand is that when they say, well, I don't really know the law, or I'll just confiscate your cannabis and write you a ticket and we'll let the courts sort it out. That is incredibly damaging to most people, right? Where you're going to have to pay $5,000 to $10,000 for a lawyer. You're going to have to pay several $100s to get your car out of impound. And you may feel like you need to take a plea deal because you can't afford an attorney, or because you have a public defender that's overworked, and a plea deal seems like the best option. So I think that's, if I ever had a chance to talk to law enforcement about why it's, one of the reasons why it's so important to understand the laws that you're bound to enforce, this would be why. Because an arrest is not just as innocent as it might seem to say, oh, well, either I'll arrest you or I'll just cite you and confiscate your cannabis and you can figure it out with the judge and the prosecutor. That has incredible, significance that goes with it. And you might end up with a criminal record where you shouldn't have. And that's tough. And if you do in fact get arrested, and you get taken to jail, and you're allowed your one phone call, if you do talk to family or you talk to a lawyer or you talk to a bail bondsman or whoever you talk to while you're there, do not say anything that would otherwise incriminate yourself, right? Just be as basic as possible, because anything you say on the phones in the jail will be used. So that's, I think that's something to be aware of. And I actually just saw a question. Someone asked if there is THC in someone's system during an accident, do they get a DUI? The same rules will apply. Now, it may turn on whether you have a metabolite in your system or not. But if you have active THC in your system and you get and you cause an accident, it will likely lead to a DUI. It'll be treated the same way as alcohol or any other prescribed controlled substance or any other controlled substance at that point.
Do they have tests for the sensitivity of the metabolite?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if they do. I think it's just, I know that, once it's, kind of broken down in your body to this term, I can never say it's like 11 nor 9, then something. That's what's written into our law is if that is what's found in your system, just that, no other types of controlled substances or other metabolites of controlled substances are found in your body, then you cannot be convicted of a cannabis or of a DUI metabolite in Utah. So that's as far as I know the law says, but I don't know what the testing, what the cutoff point is or anything, like that. Someone else might know.
Hey, did we cover if, say the driver is not a patient, but the passenger is a patient and they're using like a vape pen or using product in the car? How does that, protect? Is that, do we have any suggestions on, should we just not, try our best to avoid using product in a car?
That's a really good question. Me and Shelly have both probably been asked that 100 times each. As specific as it sounds, it's actually a very common question.
Mm-hmm.
You're safe because you have a designated driver, and for long road trips, patients are going to have their medication.
Yep, and I think that's if you were to ask me, my answer would be do not consume in a vehicle. I just think it creates more problems than it probably solves. But I also am, very much, I have a lot of sympathy for those patients that do need to consume, on a more regular basis than others. And I think you just need to be smart about your consumption. But for me, it's if you're traveling with your cannabis, keeping it in your trunk, in a locked container, and things like that, to where there's no question as to who could have had access to it. Because again, the scent is going to be enough for them to search the vehicle. And to be honest with you, once they search your vehicle, I do believe the chances of it ending well are probably go down, quite a bit, but they might still, but the experience kind of is once a cop gets inside your car, it usually doesn't end well.
Someone's asking, what about edibles in the car?
I think that, obviously that's going to have less of a scent, but I think understanding too that, any consumption within the vehicle outside of the driver, is really up to what you would do or not do. But for me, again, my advice just always is no consumption while inside a vehicle, but edibles would be a less, would have less of a scent. That's for sure.
Beautiful. Awesome. Thank you guys. Great questions. Great input. I love it. And again, I just want to take a moment to apologize for that technical issue we had there in the middle of the slide, but I think we're all back online now. So moving right along. So now I think a really interesting topic that a lot of people are kind of maybe concerned about or suspicious of are these record keeping databases that as a patient we get put into. And so we just want to talk about what they are and why and how our information is being used. And so I think Des, I think you can speak and shed some light on some of these databases.
Yep, I will. And these are one of the I understand them well, but I understand that there's a lot of questions here. So feel free to ask questions, and somebody can shout them out to me. So the EVS, that is the cardholder database, and it has, all of the, products in Utah. Everything is there. That is going to be used. It's just used very simply by patients, medical providers. So when I go to the doctor and get my medical cannabis card, that's where they enter me. That's what the pharmacy sees. That's where they're accessing what types of medications I can have. It's a very internal system. No one's going to access it outside of the state. The police are not allowed on it. It is just an internal Utah medical cannabis system. The police database, you see just the Utah Criminal Justice Information System. That is where police officers go to get their information. Now, the way that this has to work, they can't just walk around and hear somebody's name and say, oh, I'm going to look to see if this patient is using medical cannabis. So they have to have an encounter. Now, it doesn't say what kind of encounter that they have to have, but a traffic stop would be an encounter. Maybe domestic violence would be an encounter. They have to be having an encounter, a reason for them to look on this database to see if you're a medical cannabis patient. When they do, it flags them. And so they, people can see how often probably not people, because I can't see, but like their supervisors can see how often they have got on this database and checked, and they can make sure that they did it just only during an encounter.
Gotcha.
Because they would have to say, okay, this is the day you were on here. Was there an encounter that day? The other thing with that is that the feds can't get on there. That's not like they're, they still would have to get a warrant to get onto our Utah criminal justice information system.
So does that last point that you made about, whoever is responsible for managing the police officers, they can see how many times they're going in on this database. So there are checks in place to prevent law enforcement officers from abusing and targeting and profile people who they suspect might be a cannabis patient and whatnot.
Yes, and the only way that this should work is they have an encounter with you. You say, they smell cannabis. You say, I have a medical cannabis card. And they say, let me look that up. They look up your name specifically, and then pops up that your name and medical cannabis card. That's all that it shows. It doesn't show if you have a concealed carry permit. It doesn't show if you're,
Doesn't show what you're buying to them. It just simply shows the card, right?
It just shows, my understanding is it's like a simple yes or no, and maybe a patient ID number, but it's it has the patient ID number because it connects you and connect them to the EVS, if they have to. So they could call the Department of Health or whatever, or their supervisor, and say, I have this patient ID number, and it would have to connect to the system, to the state system. Gotcha. And so, anyway, it doesn't give any other information. Now we have the CSD, and that is the database. Now, my understanding is UCGIS, also they have been using this system for years and years, and that's where if you are using a opiate or something, any other medication that would cause an impairment, they have already been able to get on there and use it for that. So this was just an addition. The same with the CSD. So the controlled substance database was something that I was not excited about. And I expressed multiple times that the patients didn't want it. So we looked all over the nation to see any time, because what our concern was is this is a controlled substance database. How does that work? Are we giving our patients information out? Are, the Fed's going to be able to look at this? Who can look at this? Who can see this? So we looked, and in order to get on it, especially in Utah, you have to have a warrant. So there would have to be a judge that said, yes, we want to look at the controlled substance database. Never once in the history of cannabis can we see a time where there was ever a warrant issued or anything like that caused a medical cannabis patient to get in trouble by accessing the controlled substance database. So, and more and more states are putting medical cannabis on there, because what this database does is if I'm, Desiree Hennesey, and I go to my doctor and they want to look up, before they write me a prescription, they want to look up what medications I'm on, because although there are very few medications that cannabis reacts with, or is a contraindication, there are a few, blood thinners are one. And so if I'm on Wellbutrin, then my doctor looks on there and says, oh, I probably shouldn't put this patient on here. This patient is on this certain diabetes medication. I probably shouldn't put this patient on medical cannabis. And, and so that is what the CSD does. And that's what they added this year. We didn't love it. When you look at all those three places that your name is, it's kind of unnerving, and I'll give you that. But I feel like we are protected in each one, that, the federal government isn't coming in. The warrants are not being issued to be able to get on these. And like the police have their own, they've always had their own, you know, Utah created one for the EVS. They all seem to be needed. The CSD is just doctor communication, so they can see all of your medications, and they've been doing it with all of the other medications for years. The fear is that this is federally illegal, but we haven't been able to find anywhere where it's actually been a problem. So any questions there?
I have two things real fast.
Yep.
I'm really glad that you clarified that, because I think most people were confused between that. I think they thought there was just this like big massive system they were going to be in with all their info, everything that they've purchased, everything. So it's nice that you've separated it and told people like, hey, the police have their own, and this is specific information that they have, and then the controlled substance database. And then a good example for why that controlled substance database is necessary in a small form, working with anesthesiologists in the last MedCard clinic I was at, he let us know that the reason why it needs to be on there is because anesthesia and medical cannabis can actually conflict with each other. And if he does not know, so say you get in a car accident or something tragic happens, right? And you have to go and get trauma care. Well, they need to know that you have medical cannabis, because if they have to put you under, they actually need to use more if you're a medical cannabis patient, because they'll kind of combat each other. And so you could wake up in the middle of surgery or having your arm or whatever looked at or worked on because no one knew that you were a medical cannabis patient and that you needed a little more anesthetics. So just a small example.
Tana, that was so well put and well said. And again, you know, class, you know, the point of these databases is, again, there's really no precedent, as Des was saying, across the country of this information being used to target individuals in any way, shape, or form. These are ultimately, at the end of the day, to protect us and just make sure that, you know, all these stakeholders, whether it's law enforcement, healthcare providers, et cetera, you know, are aware of any medications that we're using, or if we're in the system or not. So great points. Anything else, guys? Before we
I think I'd make just one more point, which is that, you know, understanding how the federal government is viewing cannabis. And if anybody wants to really understand how the federal government has viewed cannabis for the last little while, you can read the Cole memo. Now, I know the Cole memo was rescinded by Jeff Sessions during the Trump administration, but it's really how the federal government has viewed cannabis for a while now. You can also read the Rohrabacher-Farr Amendment or the Rohrabacher-Blumenauer Amendment that you know hamstrings the DOJ and their ability to prosecute you know, in states where medical cannabis is legal, both businesses and individuals. So there's some protections out there for you. And the current Attorney General, you know, Merrick Garland, has said twice now since being appointed that, you know, he does not see it as a good use of Department of Justice resources to go after, you know, cannabis offenses in states where it's been legalized. So understanding that the landscape has, you know, has changed in a lot of ways. So, you know, yes, obviously nothing is ironclad. Even during the Obama administration, the DOJ was, you know, raiding places in California and things like that. But really, since Colorado, you know, went legal, you know, the landscape has changed quite a bit.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. All right. So I think moving along, I believe this is one of the last topics that we'll be covering tonight, cannabis and gun rights. I know that this is probably one of the most commonly asked questions out there. A lot of misinformation, misunderstanding. We're going to work on kind of clearing all of that up. So JD, have at it.
Yeah, and this is the question I get all the time, and I'm sure the other ladies on the panel do as well, is about having a concealed carry license and your medical cannabis card. The short answer is you can't have both of them, and really this is due to our agreement, you know, over, you know, for reciprocity for our concealed carry licenses here. So your concealed carry license will apply in other states. It's another one of those things where, because of federal illegality, you know, that is why. So if Des wants to, she can elaborate on it. But yeah, the short answer just is you can't have both of them. But one thing to keep in mind is now here in Utah, and this is actually a couple bullet points down, we have legalized constitutional carry to where you no longer need a permit to have, to be able to conceal carry a firearm. Now, obviously, if you want to have, reciprocity and be able to, legally concealed carry in other states, well, then you're not going to be able to have your medical cannabis card and your concealed carry license. However, if you only want to concealed carry here in Utah, you will no longer need to get a permit, and there will be no issues with, your medical cannabis use, at least here in Utah. Which brings me to the next point. Cannabis and firearms are a no-go under federal law under any circumstances. So even if you are a legal medical cannabis patient, or if you happen to be an adult use state and you're a cannabis user, cannabis and guns do not go together under federal law. So a lot of people ask me, well, what about my ability to purchase a firearm? And it's really going to depend on whether you're going to purchase that from a retail seller, like a Cabela's or some other type of approved seller, or from a private seller. And in the event that you approve it from an approved retail seller, you're going to have to fill out ATF form 4473. And as a matter of fact, it asks right on the form, question 21E asks, are you an unlawful user or addicted to cannabis and other drugs? And a lot of people think, well, if I'm a legal medical cannabis patient in my state, then I am not an unlawful user of cannabis. Now, the form has been recently amended, and I think this is a good job by the federal government. There is a warning that cannabis remains illegal under federal law, regardless of a state's law. States' laws on the issue. So understand, when you're answering that question under the assumption that it remains federally illegal. So if you answer no to that question and you are a cannabis user, then you've committed form fraud. If you answer yes, you will not get your firearm. So the way for you to be able to purchase a firearm is from a private seller, because you don't have to go through the same type of background check. And another question that I've had posed to me, is whether you can possess a firearm if you're actively using cannabis. And yes, you can. As a matter of fact, there is a specific section in the Utah Code, and actually I believe it is our last bullet point here, section 7610-528. It authorizes a person under the influence of cannabis or a cannabis product to carry a gun or other dangerous weapon, and dangerous weapon is defined in the law, if their use complies with Utah's medical cannabis laws. So that's something important to know for our Second Amendment folks. And then probably lastly on this issue, under Utah Code section 58-37-3.8, which is which is within the Utah Controlled Substances section of the Utah Code. Law enforcement officers are prohibited from expending any resources, for, among other reasons, to enforce a law that restricts an individual's right to acquire, own, or possess a firearm based solely on the individual's possession or use of cannabis in accordance with state medical cannabis laws. So that's important to know, that they can't spend money or time to enforce your, to try to keep you from being able to, own or possess a firearm simply because you're a medical cannabis patient, that's possessing or using cannabis. So
I talked to somebody that lived in Hawaii, and after they went legal, they literally came after their firearms. So we have a comfort there that that's never going to happen.
Or it shouldn't.
Or shouldn't, unless they tell on themselves. I've heard Desiree has had that told to her by the officials.
Yeah, well, and I think the last 2 bullet points on this slide really show how far we've tried to push this envelope, right? How we have tried to protect rights beyond the federal government. Guns and drugs don't mix. We put it in our law that it's allowed, but don't think for one second that if you are caught with cannabis and you have a gun, that you're not going to be paying federal, federal, I'm forgetting the federal prices, to deal with a federal case when you're when you hire your lawyer, because you will be, because that's the case that you're up against now. You'll be charged that way. Do we have the protections in state law? Yes. Will you probably get out of it if your lawyer's good? But that doesn't mean that it's not going to be super expensive. And I think, looking at these two different codes and saying, okay, we've really tried. Those are the codes that made us feel, when we were writing this language, that we had done a really great job, right? We had protected the concealed carry permit, and the cops couldn't go after us, and we felt good, right? And then I started hearing people saying that they were, questioning it, or they went to buy a gun and they brought it up and they were like, no, you can't. So I actually called the background people, and we had some good conversations, and they yes, we see what you've done here, but because of, and there's a code 535704 that basically says in the concealed weapon code, that says that if you cannot purchase a gun with this ATF agreement or this FFL paperwork, if you can't purchase in a retail store, then you cannot have a concealed weapon permit in Utah. So that was there previously. There's no way around it. So we tried to draft language for them to approve. We didn't get anywhere in doing that. So it falls back to, the answer is simply no, as much as we tried. And you can see the language that says we tried. I do have a list of, an email that I printed off, and I can just, I have proof from them that says that they are not actively going after any medical cannabis patients. They said over and over, look, we're not searching for this. But if a patient calls us and says, hey, I have my concealed carry permit and my medical cannabis card, they have to at that point revoke it, and you can't get it back for a year. So even if you then relinquish your medical cannabis card that day, you're still waiting a year to get your concealed carry permit back. So and we tried to get rid of this ATF agreement to go back to the Brady background check. Then all that means is that you'd have to pay like $7 in order to get a gun. But we would lose our ATF agreement, and we could not get enough people in Utah. When we kind of asked the lobbyists, they said that there was too many people that would oppose this because they like the ATF agreement and they like the reciprocity from state to state, and we would lose that if we push this issue. So anyway, so that's unfortunately where we're at. We tried our best, but right now in Utah we have constitutional carry, and and I don't know. I feel so defeated because we tried so hard, but this is where we're at. It's we're just in this crazy middle ground all the time.
Yeah, in my my opinion, just another one of a host of reasons for federal decriminalization and descheduling of cannabis, to get rid of the incongruence between state and federal law on the issue, and hopefully we'll get there. I actually heard today that 2 Republican lawmakers introduced into the House a bill to decriminalize cannabis at the federal level and to deschedule it. So hopefully we're moving in the right direction on that front.
JD, Randall Nielsen asked, to clarify, can I safely drive with a locked cannabis and a gun, neither accessible by the driver?
I do believe you can, because you have the right to possess, a firearm at the same time as you possess your medical cannabis, right? So if you're not, it's not a concealed carry, right? So you're going to have your firearm in your trunk and your cannabis in your trunk under Utah law. Yes. If somehow you were on, and this is another thing I think for us this is a perfect thing for me to say something I wanted to say which is, if you're on federal property, say you go to a national park and somehow you were to be stopped by a ranger or some other federal law enforcement on federal property, you're going to be subject to federal law. And as I said before, cannabis and guns don't go together, under federal law. And even if you didn't have a gun and you have cannabis, that's illegal under federal law, even if you show them your patient card, right? So understand where you are makes a difference. So if you are someone that likes to travel and you like to go to national parks or go on other federal property, understand that you're going to be subject to federal law at that point, not Utah law or the law of any other, any other state. So that's important. But the answer to that question is, if you are in the state of Utah, that should be legal.
Right, it is legal. We go back to police officer roulette. So we have had patients do exactly that, and that is legal. You can see it right there on the law code. But charged federally with two federal crimes because they had 2 guns in their safe and medical cannabis. And they still had to pay those higher prices. I mean, there's a big difference, right, JD, in the prices of a federal case and a state case. They still had to pay those to get out of it. Legally, yes. We talked a lot about good, better, best in preparing for this. And I think, but the best is maybe have them in separate locked containers. and I hope that would be enough to protect you. But legally, you're absolutely legal. Maybe carry them together and print off this law code and stick it in there with them. You're playing with police officer roulette, because you don't know if the police officer is going to know or not. And whatever you get charged with is what you're fighting in court. And that depends on how.
Certainly.
Beautifully put, guys. So there's really, it can get a little bit muddy, a little complicated. There's, kind of different ways to kind of look at this situation. But again, at the end of the day, just whatever you're doing, guys, just look out for yourselves, do practice best practices, always play it safe. And at the end of the day, that's all, that's the best course of action. And so I believe that wraps up our last topic for the evening, guys. This one did run a little bit late, but I do want to share with you just some general helpful links. I'll take a moment to pause on this slide. Feel free to take a screenshot. I will also add these links to the comment section of this video after we're done live streaming. Just a reminder, this will be saved onto our Facebook page for viewing at a later time. We covered a lot of different topics. There's a lot of information. So please, you will be able to come back to it and analyze and listen to parts that you may have missed or, get clarification. So definitely these links will be available to you guys in the comment section in just a moment. And lastly, we'll open it up for a Q&A. I know we did a pretty good job of answering some questions along the way, but real quick, I just want to encourage you all to follow not only WholesomeCo, but Utah Patients Coalition, Utah Cannabis United, and Utah Patients for Cannabis and Natural Choices on Facebook. Follow us on Instagram. You can also follow Utah Patients for Cannabis and Natural Choices on Twitter. That is our handle there. And just also, give a shot, give our home delivery a shot. We're delivering across the vast majority of the state, extremely convenient and discreet way to get your medicine. And so with that being said, I'm not sure if we have any other additional questions coming up or if any of our hosts or co-hosts had anything else to add here at the end, maybe something we might have omitted during our presentation.
If anybody wants to follow me on Twitter, you can at the Leafy Lawyer.
I love it.
Beautiful. And that's not the Leafly Lawyer. That is the Leafy. Leafy.
Not to be confused with the website Leafly. The Leafy, Leafy.
Perfect.
Fast too. I forgot to give Tilly a shout out on my intro. I think I forgot on if we
Go for it.
After. But anyway, everybody in the groups, I think, are pretty familiar with Tilly's story. Sweet little baby with the brain tumor. She did not make it. I feel like she won the fight. She was the brightest light in the world, even though she was going through the worst thing on the planet. And as a 1-year-old taught me so many things about how to move on and move forward and just do it with a smile on your face, because that's what's going to get you through. So Tilly has made it to the other side, and her family is just looking for some financial assistance. And we've all posted, Des, Shelly, and I, all over our Facebooks for that. So if you guys could just check out that fundraiser, give it $5, skip a coffee for a day. Seriously, you guys, come on. 20-year-old parents that have an unsurmountable amount of medical bills from this. So if everybody could just help out and give it a couple bucks, I would be so appreciative.
Could you say one more time where they can find the donation link again?
I'll put the donation link in the comments, but I know we've
Yeah.
all posted it.
Perfect. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you.
She's not their only kid either, and it's just a hard situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, thank you, Tana, for bringing that up.
You're welcome. Thanks for calling me Tana.
No problem. Well, guys, I think with that being said, I'm hearing the bells ringing in the background. You know what that means? Class is over. Thank you
Zach
again.
wants to know when you guys will have available.
I'm sorry.
Zach wants to know when you'll have ounces available.
Ooh, that's a good question. Hopefully soon. Stay tuned. Stay tuned for that.
He answered. You're good.
But let me see. All right, guys. Well, again, thank you so much. We have another episode of Cannabis Night School in the works. That'll be 2 weeks from now on May 26th. I believe we're going to be talking about the different types of products that are available in Utah, how to use them, how they're made, things of that nature. Really excited about that one. So stay tuned. Me and JD, I think, might be working on a little spin-off series from this episode. So stay tuned for that as well. And yeah, go check out Utah Patients Coalition, Utah Cannabis United, and Utah Patients for Cannabis or Natural Choices. There's a nice little surprise on there for all our viewers. So have a great night, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Bye.
Hi, everybody.
Yep, see ya.
Bye. Did I end the stream?
Nope.
This is what I always forget how to do. There we go.